So what we're going to start with is the accounting section in MySys. Now, as most of you know, in SAE, we tend to get the accounts and a lot of the accounting information from ACPAC. In MySys SBM, we have a section set up here to handle most of that information. Okay, so to start with, we're going to start with the chart of accounts. Okay, now we have our own chart of accounts now, where you're going to set up your account sets and define that default control account, the control accounts. All of the accounting works the same in that in MySys you have a subset of controls. Each of those gets mapped to the account that you want hit when a given transaction is processed. Okay, but we're pulling those accounts now from the chart of accounts in the accounting section in SBM. Okay, now where do we get these accounts from? Well, when you're integrating with ACPAC, and again, we have other accounting modules as well, QuickBooks and things like that, but with ACPAC, if you go File, Import, you'll see an Accounts from Sage ACPAC ERP. You select that, and you'll get a listing based on the database you're linked to of all the accounts that are available. You select the ones you want to bring in, click Import, and it will import and update the chart of accounts in MySys so that you can then map those to the appropriate controls. Okay? All right. So once you've got these in here, you're all set to start defining account sets and making those mappings under company options and the default account set we looked at yesterday. Okay? Now, similar to SAE, we have account sets, okay, where you can define account sets that are going to be specific to a job, item, or location. The overlay method works exactly the same as it did in SAE. Okay? For every transaction that gets processed, we check the transaction, see if there's a job, then item, then location, and then we jump to the default account set. That all works the same. There is a big difference, however, in that there is not any segmentation. Okay? So there's only overlay in SBM. Okay? That's what we use. All right? Okay, so if we drop down here to tax services, okay, the tax services section looks and feels much the same as it did in ACPAC, but this is all defined in MySys. But once you integrate with ACPAC, what you'll find is when you go in here and select one of these, we're going to ask you, do you want to update taxes from the accounting software? You click yes, and it goes to ACPAC, grabs all your tax configuration, and pulls it in here and sets it up for you. Okay, so those all get defined and updated as soon as you click on it. Okay, so if you make changes, come on in here, click on it, and it'll get updated. Currency services. Somebody asked a question about this yesterday, about the rates and things like that. Your currencies now are defined in MySys. Okay, we have our own currency database, and as such, you can control the decimal precision of any of the currencies here by just simply selecting one, double-clicking on it, and then setting the decimal places right here, 0 to 6. Okay? Now, someone asked a very good question yesterday, which was, do the rates, can you define a rate table and things like that? You can't. However, when you click on this, we will go and update the currency rate from ACPAC based on whatever the date is. So if you come and visit the currency codes, it's going to update the information very similar to what we just saw in tax services and bring in the rate as it's defined over in ACPAC. Now you can also select one of these and change it on the fly at any point in time. Okay, so that rate can be changed. Okay, now we also have under cost adjustment, much of this works exactly the same, just looks a little bit different. If you go into specific item, for example, you see a listing of all your items in here. Just double-click on the one you want to adjust the cost for, and you'll find under this unit cost section, come in here and change the cost based on whatever cost you want to update, make it whatever you need it to be. Okay, and we talked a little bit yesterday about LIFO and FIFO costing. While you can't change the buckets in here, what you can do is update the average, okay, so that will be used for any default pricing that you needed, for instance, creating a purchase order, something like that, okay, for a brand new item. All right, the period end function. This works again exactly the same. However, there's some different buttons here and a couple of enhancements that have been made. First of all, note the undo button. Okay, what this does in MySys, many of you are familiar with the fact that when you run a period end, all we're doing really is taking those transactions and we're switching the flag from historical to current when we include those in a, or from current to historical when we include those in a period end. Okay, that makes it so that when you run a subsequent period end for that same set of dates, we're not going to double post any transactions because they're flagged as historical. Well, what the undo button does is if for whatever reason you run into a problem, the power goes out, you get an error, something like that, clicking undo will switch the flag for that period end for all those transactions back to current so that you can repost the period end for those dates. Now, a key point here is it's not going to undo any postings over in ACPAC GL, so you have to go over and deal with that GL batch if it did get created. But on the MySys side, you can very quickly switch the flag for those transactions and make them current again so that you can rerun your period end once you've corrected whatever problem you ran into. Okay? Another important note, this is also a new feature in MySys SAE. However, there's a take inventory snapshot. Okay? For those of you who aren't familiar with that new function, what that does is it automatically takes a snapshot of the current quantities and costs of all your items at that point in time. You can do this manually through the stock movement function under stock control. However, having this flag selected when you run a period end will automatically go and take that snapshot for this date so that you'll have that as a comparison when you want to go and take a look at the stock movement report and display. Now, another advantage to the period end in SBM, many of you are also familiar with the fact that when you go to print your subledgers after the period end, very important report, but you can only print the subledger for the last period end that you ran. In SBM, you now have the ability through the accounting reports to actually go in and print any subledger you want. Okay, by default, it's going to default up to whatever one you're on. However, you have the ability to plug in journal number 4, 5, 6, whatever one you want to print, and you can get a subledger for past period ends. Okay, that's a big change. All right, so that's the accounting section. All right, so let's go into master files now and discuss some of the master files. What you're going to find as you start looking at this is a lot of it looks very similar, if not exactly the same as it did in SAE. Okay, but there are some changes in here. So in items, we'll just bring up one of these items and take a look at some of the things that are different. Okay, under your statuses here, you have active, inactive, but you have an engineering status now. And all that means is that an item that's flagged as engineering can't be added to MOs or work orders. But you can put it on purchase orders, and it can be transferred directly. All right, so it's engineering item, can't be added to MOs or work orders. Okay, the stock tab, all of these tabs pretty much look the same. On the cost section, okay, this cost history container at the bottom of this form is where you're going to find your cost buckets. So if you find that you decide you want to play around with LIFO FIFO costing, what you're going to find is these quantities that get received will also get used based on your LIFO or FIFO method. And this is where we're keeping track of what's available, what the cost was for that bucket, and what's getting consumed, and when we have to shift over to that next bucket. Now, another important tab here is alternates. Okay, this is brand new in MySys SBM. What the alternates for items do is they allow you to specify another item that could be used in place of this one if you didn't have stock quantity. This is going to make it, we'll look at this in just a second, so that in bills of material, you actually have the ability to define alternates for that bill of material that can be used for a given component should you not have enough stock in quantity in stock of that item. All right, so if I have I01 on a bill of material, I go to process it, I don't have enough stock, it'll check for an alternate if I've set it up on the BOM and consume that one instead. Okay, that's the alternate section. Most of these other tabs will look very familiar. Activity, notes, okay, history, and then you have your inquiry tabs up top. Right? That's items. Bills of material. Okay, a couple of changes to bills of material now. In particular, you'll note the units per lead field. Okay, and what this does is it drives the lead of this assembly based on the quantity you put in here. Okay, and that's different from SAE where the lead time was always based on 1. So things like scheduling, you could plug a units per lead in of 10. All right, that means I can build 10 I-56s in 3 days. Rather than back in SAE, it was always considered based on how long it takes you to build one. Right? Okay, another substantial change here is for those of you who run standard cost method, you know that when you change the quantity or add details to a bill of material, when you click Save, we throw a prompt up telling you you've just changed the assembled cost of that bill of material. So you're going to want to go in and run a cost adjustment. Okay? Well, now we'll prompt you that you've just affected the item cost of the assembly. But then we ask you, do you want to roll and update the cost of the assembly now? You click Yes, and it actually goes out and performs a cost adjustment for you right there at that point in time. So let's look at the alternates. If we go to I-18 for this detail, I have an alternates button at the bottom of the bill of material form. When I click on that, it gives me the ability to tell MISIS, here are the alternates you can use in place of this I-18. Okay, and it's component specific. So each one has to have its alternates defined for it, obviously. But you then come to the bill of material and you tell us which of the alternates for a given component can be used in place of it. Right? So in my case, I've said if I don't have I-18s, it's okay to use the I-01s. You can have multiple alternates set up so I could designate these in order of preference. Okay, suppliers look much the same. There's not a whole lot that changed here. However, one of the features that you can do when you're bringing people over, for instance, from ACPAC, is file import suppliers from Sage ACPAC. Select that, and you'll get a listing of your suppliers. Select the ones you want to bring in. Go ahead and import it quick and easy. They all come over into your supplier database over in MISIS. Okay, jobs are exactly the same as they were, as are locations. Okay, those are all the same as they were in SAE. Okay, so let's jump down to planning. Now, we're going to visit planning in subsequent webinars, okay, when we talk about scheduling. However, for the purposes of this discussion, let's talk about stock check. Again, a lot of this is the same, but what you're going to find similar to under stock control, this is where the direct transfers are located. Okay, so in stock check, as you open that up, you'll see we've listed trees out for each of the transfer types. Okay, and you can expand these out, and you'll see you have a lot of selections in here that are the same as they were in SAE. All right, so all of this works the same. However, one key advantage that also exists in MISIS SAE, but it's a fairly new function, so it's worth visiting here, is let's, for instance, simulate an assembly transfer. All right, we'll say we're going to build some I-56s. Okay, I initialize, much the same as it is in SAE, and then I perform an assemble. Okay, this simulates the fact that I'm going to be building 1,500 I-56s. I can then click on the display, right, and it shows me all of the items that are going to be affected, list them out at each location. I have a Create MRP button down here. Okay, and again, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, maybe haven't seen SAE in a while, SAE also has this feature as well, but we've brought it over to SPM. You can click Create MRP to generate requirements that you can use to create purchase orders and work orders or MOs from this stock check. Okay? Now we have a set filter function over in SAE that allows you to filter your display here. Okay, we brought that over as well by clicking the Advanced button, and you'll see this button available on almost every form that's going to show you this type of information in SBM. When you click on it, this allows you to set a filter up. You can set your criteria based, for instance, let's say location. I'm only interested in Loc 1. I'm going to add it. Okay, but you have the ability to provide and or statements. Okay, we're going to set this. And now I've isolated my display to just show me Loc 1. Okay, but you could set this up based on quantity, variance, whatever you need to do. All right, you can also print here. Okay, so these are all your transfers. The batch function works the same as SAE in that you create a stock transfer batch. You can check it, and then you can also bring it over into stock control, which we're going to look at in just a second, and you could then post that batch over in stock control. So it's a great feature. You create a batch of all the transfers you want to post, check it out, make sure your stock quantities look okay. Assuming they do, you then go into stock control, and you can actually post it up and affect stock quantities. Okay, so now we're going to cover stock control. Stock control is the function that you're going to use to process any of the direct transfers, as well as process any bin assignments, serial lot tracking, physical inventory, and your stock movement function. Okay, so in here, looks very similar to what we just looked at in the planning part, okay, but these are the actual transfers that you're going to use. Many of these will look familiar to you. Okay, some of the wording has changed, though. For instance, what were commit from stock transfers, we now refer to as allocate or deallocate stock. Okay, in particular, we're talking down here. All right, allocate, deallocate, that's what puts your bill of material on order, moves all the components from stock to WIP. Okay, just like the commit from stock did. Write-off transfers are now referred to as scrap. Okay, so the scrap recovers, those are what we're write-off. Now, a key change, if you have any clients that used reserve, SAE, if you'll remember, reserve quantity just basically made a note that X amount of an item was actually reserved. Okay? Now, in MISIS SBM, reserve will actually decrement stock quantity and increase the reserve quantity. Okay, that's a big change. So it will actually reduce the stock quantity and when it increments the reserve. All right, so be aware of that. Under assembly transfers, there's a scrap WIP component transfer. Okay, the effect of this is to decrease the quantity that you have in WIP of whatever item, and it simultaneously replaces it from stock. Okay, so what you would see as a net effect is that the quantity would be reduced from stock because we're making the assumption you have to replace whatever you scrap from WIP. The components subgroup of the assembly transfers are what we used to call the group transfers. And these are all the transfers that are going to affect the components of a bill of material. Okay? All right. Bin tracking is exactly the same. Most of the time you're going to designate a bin, for instance, when you process a transfer. You've set your bins up in the locations, you process the bin here. However, in a many-to-one transfer, for instance, when you build an item that has many components that could potentially be pulled from bins, you're going to generate bin assignments. Those get assigned here. All right? Serial lot tracking is located here. That has its own training. Physical inventory. So let's touch on physical inventory. This works the same as it did in MISIS SAE. However, when you print your worksheet, so what we'll do, let's see, we'll print one out here so you can see what it looks like. Okay. Right? Excuse me, I should have previewed it. All right, so the worksheet looks much the same as it did. You use that worksheet to populate your batch. Okay, so we got a new batch. You'll notice that most of these buttons here all appear in SAE. We click Worksheet. Same prompt that we get, we'll say Stock Only, Recorded. Click OK. All right, so I have some entries in here that are directly in sync with the worksheet I printed. You'll notice, though, when you look at the batch, there's no recorded quantity. Okay, we don't display that right off the bat, but if you want to see what the recorded quantities are, check the box and we'll automatically add recorded. For those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with what we do, we compare counted quantity to recorded quantity, get whatever the difference is between those two, and that's what we will adjust the inventory by when you post the batch. So recorded will be based on what quantity was in stock when you printed the worksheet. Okay, now there's another advantage for those of you who will be using serial lot tracking. And again, we'll go over that later, but it's worth looking at here. Serial lot tracking has a section over here, a little field that you can click on the drill down for. When you do that, if it's a serial lot tracked item, you can actually add a line, tell us what lot number you want to put in here, and actually make the assignment when you post the batch. So it won't generate the assignment records for you. It'll happen at post time. Okay, for those of you who have ever dealt with that, you know that it does create an assignment record over in SAE. You have to visit those count stock assignments and actually make them. All right, big difference. And the post is still the same in that that's what will actually go through and affect the stock quantities. Okay, so production. All right, so let's take just a moment here and discuss the idea behind all of this. All right, the idea with SBM is that the stock control section we just looked at, these transfers are really only going to be used if they have a specific need, they being your client, to actually go in here and dispense an item, or I have to recover some stock for something. Typically, a user is going to be processing their transfers either on a purchase order, okay, for receipts, and they're going to be processing their production from a work order or an MO. Okay? Now, as far as transferring quantities of their finished good or their saleable items, they're also going to be processing those for their production menu as well. Okay? And that's what we're going to be talking about here in the next few minutes. All right? Under the production menu, let's start with work orders. Now, those of you who used MISIS back in the DOS days, we've brought the work order back. Okay, and what the work order allows you to do is specify a number of details that you're going to build on this work order. So you reference the assembly, the quantity you're going to build, you give us a location, and then you define the start and completion dates. Okay, and what this is going to allow you to do is process your production on an actual work order. We have reports that allow you to print the work order, very similar to the way the MO prints out. Okay, but you process your production here. Now, once we look at MOs, and we'll revisit that, what we're going to see is there's actually an MO field here. Now, MOs, from an SAE standpoint, work very much the same in that you define the details that would be building the assembly on the header. So this gives you the ability to have two layers here, okay, of a work order that's referencing the MO. Now, the cool part about this is that, do you have to process both of them? You don't. And we're going to look at this when we see advanced production, but it's worth touching on here. If I had an MO referenced that had specific components for this I-45, if I come to the MO and I complete my quantity on the work order, it's going to automatically complete my MO for whatever quantity I just built, as long as they're linked up here. So you tie them together, okay, and you could have a whole work order for, say, some project that you've got out there with different MOs that have custom details for each one of those assemblies, and then when you build this work order, it's going to go and update all the MOs for you automatically. Okay, so if we scroll over here to the right, another field worth noting here is you can also link each of these details to a given sales order. Right? You can process transfer to sales for details from the actual work order. Okay? Now the processing is a little bit different. Okay? And what you'll see here once you start getting around playing with this, that each of the drop-downs for every detail has an action that you can process. Allocate obviously starts production, complete builds it, and then you can transfer it to sales. Right? Now there's one checkbox here that's very key to what we've spoken about a little bit earlier, and that's the use alternate items. Okay, we looked at the items and how you can define alternates for each one of them. You then visit the bill of material and say each one of these components has whichever alternate. When you put that assembly on a work order detail, you have to check the use alternate items if you want to make it so that this work order will go and look at those items should they fall short. If you have that checked, when you go and build this, if you don't have enough stock of the primary item, we'll go and grab the alternates you defined for that bill. Okay, very cool. Once you've set your actions up here, the way you would go ahead and process this would be to click the process. So you could have 50 details here. You go down, set your actions. If you wanted to build them all, you could set the top one and click to selected, and it'll go down through and set your action for each one of those details, whatever you've got. Auto-fulfill will populate quantities for you. Set date sets the dates for you, and so on. Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. History tab obviously will show you work order specific history. All right, so that's work orders. Now we're going to jump down to process sales orders. Okay, so the process sales orders function allows you to pull in sales orders from ACPAC that you want to create an MO or work order for, or just transfer quantities to sales. All right, so when you select this, you're going to get a prompt saying, do you want to pull in sales orders? Say yes, and it goes out for any of those linked items, and it pulls in sales order details based on what's out there in your date parameters. Okay, these two checkboxes up here allow you to control what you're looking at. Okay, exclude process sales order says, if this sales order is linked to a work order, don't show it because I've already processed it. Okay, if you choose to deselect it, you're going to get everything, even ones that you've created a work order and linked the sales order to it. Show assembled items, it does just that. It's only going to show you assembled type items in MISIS that are linked to an IC item. Okay, if you deselect that and you happen to sell non-assembled type items, we'll bring everything in for you. All right, so down here at the bottom, here are some actions you can take based on sales orders you process in here. You can, we'll talk about create manufacturing order, but that's pretty much obvious. If you have the advanced production, you create an MO to build whatever item you've selected. Okay? If you want to create work orders, you plug a location in here that we create the work order for. Select create work orders. Okay? Automatically launches the work order, brings up the detail that you're building for, the quantity, sets the dates for you. You simply release it. You're all set. Okay? And just note, automatically links the sales order for you. Now, if I just want to transfer all the quantities based on these sales orders from MISIS over to sales, I can do that. I just click transfer item to sales, and it will shift all the quantities needed to satisfy these sales orders from MISIS over to IC. All right, one click of the button. All right, so let's go to replenish sales inventory. So basically what the replenish sales inventory is a refined version of the transfer range to sales that you use in SAE. So in SAE, if you're going to transfer a range of items from MySys over to sales, those of you who remember, you can set conditions, right? Hey, transfer the full range of items so as to bring my sales inventory to 0 or to minimum or to satisfy sales orders, what have you, okay? Same type of methodology here, okay? But this allows you down bottom to set parameters and conditions to replenish your sales inventory. So the first thing you can select is the location you're going to be transferring quantities to. Okay, and this links up to the locations you've set up in inventory control over in ACPAC. Select your location, proceed to the Restore drop-down. Now this drop-down is where you're going to set the condition. So right now, I have sales inventory to 0. Okay, if I put my location in here from MySys and I click Refresh, do you wish to read sales inventory? Sure. Okay, it's checking the items. I have nothing. So right now, in order to transfer quantities to MySys so as to satisfy 0, I'm looking good. I don't have to transfer anything. So maybe I want to look at what I've got on order over in sales. So I'll change the Restore option and go to On Order. Now I've got something a little bit different. So now I have 3 details that have sales orders, and what do we see up here? The current stock quantity, what I'm currently building on work orders in MySys, what my pending MOs were, what's needed over in sales based on sales orders, and therefore what my transfer quantity would have to be. Okay? Now, if I see it in red, you'll notice down here, that means I have insufficient manufacturing stock and pending work orders to transfer those quantities over. Okay? So what I could do from here is highlight that detail and create a work order. Okay? Not only does it create a work order, but it creates a work order for just the balance I need to satisfy that transfer quantity. So if I come in here to the detail, note the ordered quantity. That's actually the difference between my pending work order and my existing stock quantity. Okay, so it figures out what the balance is, and that's what you create it for. But let's say I had all sufficient quantities. I could just click Manufacturing to Sales, shift all those quantities from MySys over to IC, and I'm good to go. I've satisfied all my sales orders with my manufacturing inventory. Want to select minimum, and it refreshes the display to show me what I'd have to transfer over based on this sales location to satisfy the minimum quantity of that item in IC. Okay, now as far as transaction date, auto build, remember these are located down here, so you can change the transaction date of this transfer if needed. That's what gets written to our log. Auto build, I'm sure you're all familiar with, is also selected down here. Okay, and the only other thing of note here I'd like to point out is the show only needed items. Okay, if you deselect that, that's going to show you every item that's linked to a sales item, and you'll see those show up in your display here. Okay, toggle it back, and now you're going to show only what you need. Now, there's another key advantage to this. Let's say I don't want to transfer 149 from this display. I understand it's telling me that's what I need for minimum, but I happen to know I got a big order coming in next week, whatever. You can transfer these by just change the quantity, double-click the field, enter your quantity in, and that's the quantity that will get transferred in. And you could do that if we had a whole list of these items. If I go back to my on order and say yes, and I get a few of these, I can go and visit the transfer quantity field of each one of these. And that's going to be what we use when you process the transfer, create the work order, what have you. Okay, replenish sales inventory. All right, so let's talk about flush manufacturing inventory. Okay, this basically goes the other direction of replenish. All right, by that I mean this allows you to push quantities from MySys based on conditions you set in MySys. All right, so if I want to transfer all the quantities of all my linked items so as to bring my manufacturing inventory to 0, I set my IC location I'm going to be transferring to, set the stock basis I want to base the quantity on, tell what location I'm going to be transferring from. Okay? And now I get a display showing me what the excess manufacturing inventory is, what the transfer quantity is going to be, and what my current stock is so that I can relate to the values I'm seeing up here. Okay, so if I choose minimum, okay, those quantities are going to reduce a little bit. I click refresh, updates my display, and now I see my minimum's 1,000, so now I'm transferring 1,000 less. But I can, again, change the transfer quantity if I need to. Okay, so you can set this flush condition on 0, minimum, or reorder. Keep in mind in MISIS, just like it is in SAE, those are all location-specific thresholds. Okay? Your stock basis can be set to stock only, stock plus reserve, stock plus on order, or stock plus reserve plus on order. That can be important, remember, because reserve reduces stock quantity now. All right? Again, you can control the transaction date, auto build right here. Okay, and your manufacturing to sales, transfer them over. Okay, so we've got work orders in the system now. We've looked at the replenish, the flush, the process sales orders. Let's talk about production schedule for a minute. Okay, so the production schedule allows you to take a look at points in time bear with me one second here. Okay, points in time based on dates. So what do I see here? Here are my work order numbers. Here are the items that are being built on my work orders. I can mouse over those, and it throws a form up showing me what work order, location, and quantities, okay, I've got going on. So very quickly, okay, we're only dealing with a small subset of work orders here. However, if you have a whole list of work orders here, you could come to your production schedule and take a look at what you've got going on that week, that month, that subset of months. Okay? So if I happen to look at this, I might want to shift some dates around. So you can click and drag details from this display, and it will automatically update. So we'll go out to March 1st for this I-45. It'll automatically update the start and completion date for that detail on this work order. Okay, so I can shift the dates around by looking at the production schedule and clicking and dragging whatever I want. And it's going to automatically update the work order detail that I just shifted. So let's go and look at that real quick here. Production work orders, work order 3, details, grab that I-45. Okay, March 1st to March 4th. So it automatically updates the dates on that work order for you. Now, we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but you can imagine when you select shop operations, what you can do with your routing details when you start getting into level 3, and how you can deal with overloaded work centers. Okay, and that's later on, but the same type of system applies for shop ops. Okay, you can click and drag, but we'll look at that another day. All right, I just wanted to touch on that there. All right, so now we've got all this information that we've looked at. Okay, so let's talk about how you can manipulate all that information and look at it when you first log in. Okay, so let's talk about dashboard alerts for a second. Under dashboard alerts, you can set up custom alerts to look at whatever information you're interested in looking at, and you can set predefined actions that you want to take or allow a user to take based on what you're finding. So for instance, let's look at item shortages here. Okay, I know we'll probably have a lot of questions here, and we'll really try to get through all this, but let's look at this real quick. Item shortages. It's going to show you when you first log in, you go to dashboard alerts, right, the main page. click on item shortages. This shows you all items that are currently below, I think it's configured to the minimum or reorder, and look at the stock. So let's look at how it's configured. So you click on the configure up here because we want to check this one out. Okay. The first thing we look at are what are the actions I want to allow someone to take from this item shortages dashboard. I want them to be able to check open purchase orders, create new POs, because if it's short, I want to create a new purchase order for it. I want to maybe have them transfer stock, show me any bills of material because if I had questions about why they were short, and show me where the item's used in an assembly. Those are actions I'm going to allow someone to take from this form right here off the dashboard. I'll click next. So let's see how we've set it up. So it's based off minimum, right? So what we've done is created this little alert here that says, hey, show me any items whose stock quantity is less than the minimum level. And that's what it does. When you click on it, any item that's out there where the stock quantity is less than minimum, it's going to show you there. All right? Now, you can set any number of these dashboard alerts up doing pretty much whatever you want. Just click the drop-down here, select your location detail, select the threshold, set greater than, equal to, whatever, the value, and then you plug it in, save it, and that's your new dashboard alert. If you want to add new ones, okay, add custom alert, edit label, call it test, click configure, define the data source you want to drive it from. So, yeah, it can be items, locations, bills, bins, suppliers, purchase orders, you name it. Okay, you can set these up in any type to show you any types of conditions you want. Okay, and the actions are driven by what you select. Okay, they will change dynamically based on the data source you're using. All right, so have fun, play around with those. You can really make them pretty powerful tools. Okay, so let's talk housekeeping here real quick. Much of the housekeeping is the same, but there are some different functions in MySys SBM. All right, so under housekeeping, you'll notice change item numbers. That's much the same. Supplier numbers, that's the same. Delete obsolete items, replace BOM components. These all look familiar to you. Okay, what we have here is restart maintenance. Okay, we've all seen failed transactions. We've all been prompted with restart records from time to time. This is SBM's attempt at a restart maintenance. So if you run into failed transactions, check here. See if the process was captured. Go in and process the restart. All right? Check data integrity. You can no longer run it from ACPAC to check your SBM database. We have our own data integrity. Right? It has the fix minor errors option. It still does things like recalculate on order quantity, corrects whatever fields it can correct. Right? So check data integrity is here under housekeeping. Repair sales order serial lot info. This is not necessarily for use with ACPAC. This is more for QuickBooks and other accounting packages, so I won't really get into that. Edit custom fields. Okay, someone asked a question about custom fields yesterday. Custom fields have been enhanced incredibly in SBM. So let me show you. You can create custom fields for any one of these tables, okay, that you see here. So let's select items, edit. I want to create a custom field in items. Let's call it quality control, right? So we're going to add one. We're going to call it quality control. So maybe I'm going to set a flag in here once it's passed or something like that, or if something changes. Single line text. You can make single line text, but you also have these other formats to set in here. You can set whole number. You can set true false. You can go date time and so on. Now, in here, let's go single line text because this is the really cool part. I'm going to save this. So I've got quality control in here. I can expand it. It's added it there. But more to the point, if I go to Master Files Items, here's my main item display. It's going to show your client every item they have. However, if you scroll to the left, what do we see here? It actually creates a column and a field in items that you'll be able to see. So they can come off this summary form here without even having to drill down into it, and they actually see the column from this main display. And that's true anywhere they put it. Bills of materials, suppliers, jobs, locations, you name it. Right? So the other thing that's here, and you're not going to be able to do this from sample data, so keep that in mind. But in a live database, the print data tables comes up as active. Right? And this makes it so that you're, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the report toolkit. This gives you a printout, allows you to print out the data tables. You can go all tables. You can select specific tables to get whatever fields you're looking for. Right? The print data tables. Okay, well, we burned through a lot of information there, and I think it's time for questions now. So that's basic
Okay,
operation.
Doug, I commend you for covering a huge amount of material in a relatively short amount of time. Thank you very much.
You. Yes. Yep.
We do have some questions here from people out in the field, and Frankie Chan from a long way away wants to know, can custom field data be transferred to the ACPAC optional field data? I know the question and the answer, but what do you say?
I don't believe it can, no. I'd have to check on that, but
no,
I'm not
cannot
sure.
happen.
Yeah,
and then Eva Patterson from equally far away. Do you get work order and dashboard alerts in the basic version of the software?
Yes, you do. You do.
That comes with the basic manufacturing module. That's right. Okay. Tom Blazek says he has several questions, but he's gonna hold them back for some reason. Okay. Okay. So let's see. Ed says, can a dashboard alert perform math? That is, compare on hand plus on order versus minimum. That sounds like not so much math as comparisons.
Yeah, I bet you could get real close to that if you use some and statements. You know, as far as actual math, though, you know, that I don't think you'd be able to actually sum fields, but you could probably get close to setting conditions that would give you results for what you were looking for.
That's exactly right, because we do greater than, less than, equals, and all that sort of thing, right?
That's right, yeah.
Good question, Ed. I should always depend on you. Doug, Jim Shekel says, what functions does SAE have that MISIS SPM does not? Well, that's a pretty long answer, and one we've published on any number of occasions. Let me just focus on the second part of that. Why would anyone buy SAE anymore? There are a few things that SAE does that SPM doesn't do, but they're precious few. And I think you would have to weigh, some of the benefits like Doug explained, no segmented account numbers versus all the incredible new things that you've seen today. So I'm guessing that most people will largely favor SPM over SAE. Okay, Dana asks, are work orders included in the basic version? Yes. Work orders are part of basic manufacturing. And Sonia asks, can you use a hand scanner with the barcoding module to fill in populate bin information, Doug?
We do have programs, yep, and that's similar to SAE as well, that allow you to scan that, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but that works much the same as it does in SAE, and I kind of touched over that. But when you go into the batches, what you'll find is on the batch there's actually a barcode button, and that works exactly the same in that you pull that file right up in and it populates the batch. But yeah, we would have a selection in the barcode program that allow for a bin field.
Okay, here's a question from Tom Blazek. I was just trying to translate into English, Tom. Just kidding. Alternate item, actual process such as does the MO automatically use an alternate item, or do you specify? Do you think you understand that question, Doug?
Well, the way that works is you actually define the alternate item in the bill of material, okay? Well, you set them up in items, and you would define, say, item IO1 has this alternate and this alternate that I can use in place of it. You then, for each bill of material, tell us which items would conceivably be able to be replaced for each of those components, okay? On the work order, when you build the assembly, we're going to use primary item always. If quantity and stock of the primary item is not there, we will then go and grab the alternate you set up in that bill of material, okay? And it's based on precedent, so whichever one you have in there first.
Okay, let's see. Eva asks, when the currency rates are updated, does the rate on the day get used so that when you run a period end, it's using the rate on the exact date, not the current exchange rate?
Well, you'd have to grab, you'd have to visit the currency on that day to update the rate. Okay, that doesn't happen in an automatic way. But when you visit the currency, it's going to update the rates for all of your currencies. That's going to then translate over when you create purchase orders and update the price based on whatever rate was there. I hope that answers your question.
Jim Shekels, can the synchronization between SBM and ACPAC be automated by some kind of scripting?
Well, I think it's pretty automatic right now. I'm guessing you mean syncing the taxes and the currencies and that so that you didn't have to visit them, that type of thing. It's nothing that we're aware of out there, but yeah, I would have to say that'd be up to you.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say that we have talked about building elves into the product, but at this point in time, they're not available. Let's see. Tom Blazek, if you drop and drag a schedule info into the Gantt view, what happens, for example, to the printed documents? Oh, yeah, that's the part where we erase all the printed documents, right, Doug?
Well, no, what it does is it updates the date and the work order itself. As far as anything that had been printed, obviously there's no way we could affect that. However, when you subsequently printed it, yes, you would go out and print it. But if you're talking statuses and things like that, yeah, it's going to update the status because you've modified the work order, the MO. But yeah, so that then you then have to go and reprint it. Yeah, there's no alarm that would go off or anything like that. However, talking about dashboard alerts, in theory, you might be able to set one up to show you revised work orders or something like that.
And Dana Stinson would like to know whether purchasing is in the basic manufacturing module. It is not. Purchasing is a separate module called advanced purchasing, and we did that intentionally, trying to keep the entry price low for people who said, I don't need that, I just get some forms for Staples. But in our experience, over 90% of our users purchase the advanced purchasing module. Haven't you heard that, Doug?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah. Dominic would like to know, can we do a physical inventory by lot number?
No, your physical inventory options, you could create a physical inventory batch based on whatever you want, but the information and the selection criteria as far as us automatically populating that batch are right, just what you see, what you're used to seeing. But, yeah, the key advantage there is being able to make that assignment in the item. But, in theory, you could set an export up or something like that where, you populate the batch by import-export rather than basing it off one of our inventories. That's certainly reasonable to think. But there's no automated selection you could choose that would do that for you, no.
Okay, our friend Ed says, how about a keyboard wedge for entering data?
Well, it would
how
work.
about that, Ed? No.
It would work. It would work much the same as the others. You're scanning fields in based on the program you're running. So, sure.
Okay. Serge would like to know whether SPM will remember the previous currency rate.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that. However, once you set the rate, that's what it stays at, until you go back in and update it. So, I go in and visit it. It's 1.54. That's what it's going to be until I go and update it again. So, I think that answers that.
Now, here's what I need help on, Doug, from Tom. Then what about as-built data or detail? Do you still capture it as built?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by that, as built.
Okay. Sorry, Tom. Dana, is there a list as to what is added by the other parts of SPM? Well, yeah, we've got a list on our website that has what's new in SPM, and I'll have to dig that out. Dana, if you'll just send me an email, dave@mythink.com, and I'll send you the link to that. What's new in SPM. By the way, so that you don't all have to send me like 1,000 emails, I will post that in the partners area in the menu. So maybe tomorrow, look in the menu in the partners area under resources, and you'll find something entitled "What's New in SPM." Doug and I have been working on this for such a long time, we kind of forget that there was a whole life before SPM, right, Doug?
I know, right?
Yeah. Let's see. Then Frankie wants to know, in SAE there are 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. How about in SPM? We kind of got rid of the levels, Frankie, for that. And so we have now these individual modules. There are rough comparisons to the levels, but those levels don't exist anymore. So, for example, in level 2 of SAE, you got, what was it, manufacturing orders, Doug, and did you get MRP in level 2? So those are separate modules now. Tom, where do you list things that you check versus not check in your attempt at data integrity, so that I might know what to go look for a problem that I might not have checked? Doug, you want to address that? So you can't say, I want to check this and not that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what
it's one giant system that has to be checked in its entirety.
Yeah, I think what you're looking for is what the output is. So when you run the data integrity, what happens is we're going to go scan the data, and then we're going to throw a form up. It doesn't look exactly like a report, but it's a form, and it tells you what we found, what issues are out there. You can then print that out. A lot of that stuff for you, Tom, is going to be pretty obvious, and you'll know where to go with it. If you ever, though, have any questions about any errors or need assistance with any of that, just let support know. We can help you get past those.
Okay. Hey, Doug, hopefully you know the answer to this one, because Dana Stetson wants to know what versions of SAE are required to convert to SPM. You did some magic yesterday converting an SAE database into SPM. What version number did you need?
Well, right now it's 5.5 and 5.4, I believe, will also convert. However, you want to hold off on 5.6 until our next update, which is will be 4.2 of SPM, and then we'll be going with 5.6. So.
Okay. Jim asks, is there a Microsoft SQL database version for SPM?
SPM is entirely SQL.
So that's all it works with.
Microsoft SQL, that's correct. Now, having said that, someone else, he may have missed the question yesterday. Someone else actually asked yesterday, is it okay if ACPAC is pervasive? And that is fine. But the SBM database itself is entirely SQL. So.
Okay, Eva asks, can you set up a dashboard alert that the process button would then update the currency so someone would log in every day and the first alert was the currency one so they could just process it and then they could continue on?
I'm not
Just
sure
an idea.
Yeah, you'd have to look at that, or I'd have to play around with it a little bit. I'm not sure how you'd go with currencies and what you could do with it.
But at the present time, there's no way that you can go affect the currencies in an alert that I'm aware of.
Right.
Yeah, except just create an alert. Oh, how, Doug, just create an alert for anything. That is, that you have more than one item, right? And the message is, hey, go check the currencies. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Something like that.
Right, right.
Joe Mosseri wants to know, where is the inventory cycle list? That's actually kind of cool because we changed that from SAE. We made it a lot better, I think. Show them that, Doug.
Where the cycle is?
Yeah, where do you specify the cycle list? Okay, so
in the physical,
the cycle number is the same place it always was, right? Which you're about to show them.
Right.
Okay, then there it is. And then we go, then we just go to physical inventory and show them how we select the cycles. Yeah. So, yeah, just put them in with commas in between, I think.
Yeah, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I think that was what we're looking for right there.
Yep.
Okay.
You can type in the cycles you want. Remember, new items get cycle 0, so you want to exclude those if you want, or include them. Then you print them out.
John asks, should we only be targeting SBM, small businesses with SBM? Oh, small businesses with SBM. Is there any kind of API? Oh, that's the first question. Should we only be targeting small businesses? I don't think so. In many regards, this product is far more powerful than SAE. And we've sold it to some pretty big businesses in the last couple of years. So
yeah,
I wouldn't stick with, true, it does work with QuickBooks, but that's why we're excited about it integrating with ACPAC, is that it takes you to that mid-range where QuickBooks doesn't go. Number 2, is there any kind of API to allow partners to synchronize, customize synchronization for use with third parties? Well, the entire API issue is on our wish list. We do not currently have anything to offer you. So Jim Shekels, this is one of Jim's, and he's going to be happy with the answer. So you can't inventory serial numbers or lot numbers? Question mark. Go take it, Doug.
You can, yes, you can inventory them.
Yeah.
And
why can you? Because Jim Shekels bugged us for years and years.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, and actually, it works exactly the same as it does in SAE in that you enter your accounts and all that. But more to the point, you actually get to plug the assignment in to the batch by just clicking that drill down, and you can actually make the assignment in here to whatever lot you're going to update the quantities to, so that when you post the batch, there's no assignment to deal with. It already happened. So it's actually a step better than SAE in that respect.
Great. I hope that makes Jim happy. Tom Blasek asks, when alternate items are used? Let's say, when are alternate items used?
At allocation or at completion time. So when you're on a work order, if you allocate an assembly, we're going to pull the components from stock and move them into WIP. At that point in time, if your main or primary item happens to fall short, we're going to go grab the alternate if it's available, and we'll pull it out.
Okay. We're over our hour, but as long as people want to hang around and ask questions and answer, I get paid. How about you, Doug?
Sure.
Okay. Eva asks, with a physical inventory, if you don't show the recorded inventory, does the physical inventory still work the same? Or is
Absolutely.
it just a display and the stock adjustment is still the difference between the recorded and the counted?
This is actually, the recorded a lot of times, if people aren't familiar with what it is, can be confusing because they look at that, hey, here's my count, and then what's this recorded all about? We give you the toggle now so that if you want to just keep it less confusing, enter your count in there. You don't need to see the recorded. Most times you're not going to have the need to change it anyway, so you just keep it invisible, keep it hidden, and enter your accounts in. Go ahead and post it. It is there for your reference. It does not change the way physical inventory works, though. We compare counted to recorded and apply the difference.
Yeah, I remember in the early versions we had that checkbox labeled hide confusing stuff.
Right.
Okay, Tom says, when the system used alternate items, what happens as built detail, especially use a serial lot numbered item? So what's the issue of serial lot numbered items and alternate items, Doug?
If you could envision this, it is simply using one item instead of the other. And we're just able to dynamically go and get whatever alternate item can be used in place of the primary one. So literally, if it's serial lot tracked and it gets used, you're going to generate an assignment record and have to assign that lot, that quantity. So it's treated exactly the same, just as if you were to say, oh, wait a minute, I can't do an allocate or a complete on this assembly because I don't have enough IO1s in stock. Let me go to the BOM and actually replace IO1 with I-18 because I know I have some of those. This just does that for you on the fly. So as far as serial lot tracking is concerned, you consume an item that's serial lot tracked, you make an assignment for it. So it's exactly the same.
Okay. Now here's what I like. When is it time to sign up for the next MISIS training cruise? Well, we went on the MISIS training cruise a few days after Thanksgiving last year, and as far as I know, we'll be doing it again in 2010. And we didn't lose any of our customers overboard, so looks good. Probably end of the summer we'll be talking about that. If they lose the internet connection, this is a good question from Sonia Gray. If they lose the internet connection, can they still log in and use MISIS? Or what if you're sitting in an airplane? How about that, Sonia?
Yes, you can. You get basically a 30-day grace period. When you log in and all that, we get our server gets updated with the fact you logged in and the version that you're running for things like updates and stuff like that. However, if for whatever reason, like you said, you lose internet connection, you don't have internet connection, whatever, you have a 30-day grace period where eventually you would time out, so you got to get your licenses updated at some point. However, you get 30 days. So.
Okay, Mary from Australia would like to know, is the currency rate set on each document when the document is created or revised, so updating the currency rate won't affect existing transactions? That Mary, she's always thinking ahead. All right?
Yeah,
Any comment on that, Doug?
Once you have the rate on the purchase order, that is what you issued that PO for. So that price is locked in. I think that's what she's asking. So that would only affect new purchase orders you created.
Yeah. Susan asks, is it compatible with SQL Express? Yes. In fact, we install SQL Express with the rest of the software. So if you don't know what a database engine is and don't want to learn, you don't have to worry about it. Any comment on that, Doug?
No, that's right, SQL Express. The only comment, someone had a question yesterday, I don't think we got to, or the last session, about is there a size limit to SQL Express, and there isn't, no. But yeah, SQL Express default database. So.
Yeah. Chris asks, how come Doug keeps talking about yesterday? We'll have to understand that Doug works in tech support, so he thinks or he feels like he stays at the office 7 days a week. That's the problem.
I apologize. Every day is yesterday to me.
Dana asks, is planning included in the basic version? And I can tell you it is, well, planning. What's planning? There are a couple of components of planning. One is stock check, sort of like what you had in SAE. Yeah, Doug, show them that. Sort of like what you had in SAE, but on steroids. And then that's included in basic manufacturing. But the other component of planning, which is material requirements planning, show them the diagram there, if you will, is part of the MRP module, separate, an additional $1,500. There you go. Okay. Good. Thanks. You're welcome, Joe. Tom, is there any new function for ECO control within a bill of material that would allow management of multiple ECOs with options like retrofit, new build only? I know this is something you're interested in, Tom, and it's on a wish list, but not in the product at this time. Here's a question from Frankie. Is the SBM serial lot number able to pass back to ACPAC serial lot number? Good question, Frankie. I like that. Doug?
It works the same as SAE does as far as serial lot tracking is concerned. Like I said, a lot of that changes in 5.6, though, so wait for 5.6 for us to get the 4.2 SBM.
Yeah, that's because in 5.6, ACPAC does it a completely different way. So we had to do a little, a lot of catch-up there. But, yes, it does work quite well.
Now, we do, just to kind of touch on that, as far as integration questions are concerned, we do actually have something up on the website that actually covers all the integration and what the little gotchas might be, you know, in that key that was created. And that is up there as well, if you had questions about that. So.
Okay. Joe Moseri, alternate items. If MISIS runs out of the main item on a bill of material, it switches to the alternate item for the remainder, right? Also, what does it do with the bill of material work order cost? Is it updated?
Yes, it is, and that is correct. Yep, that's exactly what it does. Yes.
Rebecca.
So it would use the cost of the alternate, just to be very specific. Yes.
Yep. Rebecca asks, since you can undo the period end, how can you prevent MISIS entries from going into general ledger twice?
Well, that's kind of the key point that I referenced there. The undo undoes the MISIS side only. So you literally have to go and check in ACPAC to make sure that the GL batch didn't get created, or if it did and it only got partially created because the process was interrupted, you might want to delete it. And then repost or process your period end. Undo only affects the MISIS side, and literally, it's just changing that flag on the transaction. So, but we don't touch the ACPAC side. So you would have to go over there and do some research to see what might have happened or not in that case.
Okay, Mary. Again, when you complete an MO. Maybe you want to say this to advanced production, Doug, your call. Can you transfer to sales immediately? If so, are you able to set the standard cost, or is the cost of the transfer to the standard cost plus some other cost used to be different in SAE?
Yeah, I mean, we can save that for the advanced production. However, what I can tell you is we still allow you to transfer to sales prior to or after the MO is closed. But yeah, I mean, as far as the costing and things like that, we can do that in the advanced one.
Yeah. Ian Lowe points out that there is a size limit to SQL Express at 4 gigs. Thank you, Ian, for pointing that out. And Sonia asks, I understand that the free version of ESYS, same question then, is limited to 4 gigs. It's hasn't been a problem for anything we do, but our expectation is that if you have a huge amount of data, you probably want to install the regular version of Microsoft SQL Server. So we have a number of people who have rung in on that. Is there any quality control process? Not at the present time. When you create work orders off sales orders, will it respect the build quantity, or does it create a work order for the order quantity? Asked George Barretto. Want me to run that by again, or can you read it, Doug?
Yeah, could you say that one more time?
When you create work orders off sales orders, will it respect the build quantity, or does it create a work order for the order quantity?
Yeah, it creates a work order for the quantity needed for the sales order, for the sales
Right.
order detail. However, you can change that. That can be modified, the transfer quantity.
You can just override it.
That's right.
Yeah. Jim Schegel says, as I recall, the issue with SAE, this is about physical inventory. I believe all the problems with physical inventory of serial lot numbers was resolved. Jim, I'll say that. We haven't got any negative feedback on how we do that. So, right now, there aren't any more questions. So, Doug, what do you say? Should we wrap it up?
Sounds good then.
We have another session coming up next week. I think it's on Wednesday. If you go to our website in the partner area, you will find the place where this session will be available, I think, tomorrow. You can listen to it again if you want to hear us. And also you can register for next week's session. So thanks very much, folks, for your attention. Appreciate it. On behalf of all the folks here at Mises World Headquarters, have a good day and stay clean. Bye.